At my ex's wedding, his new bride grabbed the mic and sneered. I rescued him from that damaged woman. The crowd erupted in laughter and raised their glasses. But then, a waitress stepped forward, pulled off her hat, and said, "I'm his daughter, and I've got something to say." The bride's face went ghost white. Hey, Reddit. Before we start, I just want to say that we are very close to 3,000 family. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and be a part of this growing community and subscribe us to touch the 3,000 milestone before the end of this month. Let's start the story. I sat in the back corner of the reception hall, nursing a glass of water with trembling hands. I hadn't wanted to come. Hell, I shouldn't have come. But my ex, Adam, had personally invited me. He'd called 3 times, left voicemails, even sent a formal invitation in the mail, said he wanted to prove there was no bad blood. Closure, he called it. Closure. As if inviting the woman he left in shambles to the celebration of his new beginning was some grand gesture of maturity. I didn't want closure. I wanted peace. But a part of me, probably the same broken, curious part that still flinched when I saw his name pop up, wanted to see who he'd replace me with. And more importantly, I wanted to see if the smile on his face was worth everything he'd destroyed. The reception hall was lavish, draped in white and gold, with soft piano music playing in the background. The kind of wedding you see in magazines. Perfect flowers. Perfect lighting. Perfect couple. Or at least that's what they were pretending to be. His new wife, Rachel, was everything I wasn't, or so I'd been told. Younger, thinner, louder, always dressed like she was walking a red carpet. I recognized her instantly, even before the MC introduced her. I remembered the photos Adam had posted just weeks after our split. The same platinum blonde hair, the same smug smile. She was already in his life while I was still trying to save our marriage. She wasn't a secret. She was a ticking bomb he let explode in my face. The ceremony had been fine. I kept my head down. No one really noticed me except for a few awkward glances from his distant relatives who remembered me from family dinners and holidays. They whispered, shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I was a ghost at a party of the living. I had no intention of making a scene. I was going to quietly finish my drink, slip out before dessert, and disappear forever. That was the plan, until the speeches started. One by one, friends and family took the microphone, each more glowing than the last. They praised Rachel for being a beacon of joy in Adam's life. They toasted to new beginnings and leaving the past behind. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms as they all but spat on the years I'd spent loving him. Holding him up through his depression, through his mother's death, through losing his job. They didn't mention that. No one ever does. People only remember the part where you fall apart, not the storm that broke you. And then Rachel stood up. She wore a silk white dress that clung to her like it was painted on. She held the microphone with one hand and her champagne flute with the other. The room quieted. All eyes were on her. She smiled, eyes sparkling, and then delivered the line that detonated everything. I rescued him from that damaged woman. A roar of laughter followed. The kind that stabs you right between the ribs. I could feel every pair of eyes shift, some glancing my way, some pretending not to. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the insult, it was the way she said it. Like she was proud, like she thought it made her some kind of hero. The guests clinked glasses, some whistled. One of the groomsmen even shouted, "Damn right you did." My vision blurred. I thought I might be sick. I stood up, heart pounding, ready to leave. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't come to be humiliated. I didn't come to be the punchline of her victory speech. And then, just as I turned to leave, I heard a voice. Clear, confident, familiar. "I'm his daughter, and I've got something to say." Every head in the room turned toward the voice. A waitress dressed in the standard black and white uniform stood at the edge of the dance floor. She pulled off her cap, letting her chestnut brown curls fall loose and stepped forward. And my knees nearly gave out. It was Ava, our daughter. I hadn't even seen her. She had taken this job without telling me. She hadn't spoken to her father in over 2 years. Not since the night he walked out on us and never looked back. She was 16 now, headstrong and sharp-tongued, and standing in the middle of a wedding reception like she owned the place. Rachel's face went pale, deathly pale, like she'd seen a ghost. Adam's mouth fell open. He looked at Ava like he couldn't quite believe she was real. I wanted to run to her, to grab her hand, to protect her from what I knew was coming, but I couldn't move. Neither could anyone else. Ava raised her voice, calm but forceful. She didn't tremble. She didn't falter. You call my mother damaged, but let me tell you something. She's the one who picked up the pieces after you broke everything. She's the one who worked 3 jobs while you ran off to play house with someone new. She's the one who sat up all night with me when I cried because you didn't even call on my birthday. You think this wedding makes you a better man? It doesn't. It just proves what we already knew. You were never a husband. You were never a father. You were just a coward in a tux. Silence. You could hear a pin drop. Rachel looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Adam's face turned red, then white, then red again. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The guests were stunned. A few shifted uncomfortably. One old aunt clutched her pearls. No one raised a glass. No one cheered. Ava turned to me then, eyes softening. She walked over, took my hand, and said, "Come on, Mom. We're leaving." And with that, we walked out. Past the gaping mouths, past the shocked relatives, past the men who had once promised to love us forever. We didn't look back but that wasn't the end. Because later that night, Ava received a message. One that would change everything again. We didn't speak much during the ride home. Ava sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her fingers curled tightly around the edge of her dress shirt. I glanced at her now and then, watching her jaw clench and unclench as though she was replaying everything in her head, dissecting the scene piece by piece. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but I knew better. Ava needed space after something like that. Hell, I needed space too. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. Like the weight of everything that had gone unsaid for years was finally pushing itself to the surface. We were both trying to process what had just happened. How quickly years of abandonment, betrayal, and emotional erosion had been set ablaze in one room in front of so many strangers, only to burn away the last illusions we had left about Adam. It was past midnight when we got home. Ava went straight to her room without a word, and I sat alone at the kitchen table, still in my dress, staring at my untouched glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a few messages from people who had been at the wedding, some apologizing for what had happened, others pretending to check in while secretly fishing for gossip. I ignored them all. It didn't matter what they thought anymore. The people who had silently sipped champagne while my daughter defended me in front of a crowd of cowards, those weren't my people. I didn't need their pity or their approval. What mattered was that Ava had stood up. She had taken all the pain and all the silence of the past 2 years and turned it into a firestorm that cracked open every lie in that room. She did what I never could. She exposed Adam for who he really was, and she did it with more strength and clarity than any adult ever had. Then came the message from Rachel. Her words dripped venom and self-importance. "You and your mother ruined my wedding. I hope you're proud. Adam is devastated. He doesn't want anything to do with you anymore. You're toxic, just like her." Ava handed me the phone with trembling hands, but she didn't cry. She stood tall, her eyes rimmed with fury, not sorrow. I read the message twice, then put the phone down and looked her dead in the eye. I told her that Rachel was irrelevant. That Adam's silence was his own shame to carry. That she, Ava, was the only one in that entire room who had spoken the truth. She said nothing, but her body slowly relaxed. It wasn't validation she needed. It was understanding. It was knowing she wasn't crazy, that she hadn't imagined the abandonment or the pain, that someone else saw it too. And I did. I always had. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Someone had recorded the speech and posted it online. It spread like wildfire. First through the wedding guests, then through local gossip pages, and eventually, it made its way to the broader internet. Comments flooded in, most siding with Ava, calling out the cruelty of Rachel's words and Adam's cowardice. There were think pieces, reaction videos, even a podcast segment analyzing the situation as an example of narcissistic relationships and generational trauma. It was surreal watching our pain become content, but it also brought a strange kind of justice. The truth wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. People were talking. And Rachel. She cracked. She started posting Instagram stories late at night, rambling about how everyone was against her, how she was being bullied and misunderstood. She even accused Ava of staging the whole thing, but no one believed her. The more she talked, the worse it got. 3 weeks after the wedding, Adam showed up at our door. He looked like a man who had been living inside a tornado, his eyes bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled, his shoulders slouched with the weight of his own regrets. He stammered out some half-baked apology, said he made a mistake, said he never meant for things to go this far. I stood there listening, my arms crossed, not out of anger but out of indifference. The man who once held my heart now looked like a stranger begging to borrow time that wasn't his anymore. I told him plainly that he hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost a daughter who had once waited every night for his calls, who had held on a hope for far too long. When Ava came downstairs and told him to leave, he finally understood the truth. There was no forgiveness coming. Not this time. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the wounds began to heal. Ava started therapy and began writing, channeling her emotions into powerful, heartbreaking poetry. She submitted one of her pieces to a local magazine and it was published. I framed it and hung it on our living room wall, right above the bookshelf we built together the year Adam left. It was a symbol of growth, proof that beauty could rise from broken places. I took a job at a local women's shelter, helping other women find their footing after the chaos of emotional abuse. Sharing my story felt liberating, like cutting the final thread that tied me to the pain. I met women whose scars mirrored mine, and together, we stitched ourselves back together. Not perfectly, but stronger. One rainy afternoon, Ava and I sat on the porch, wrapped in an old blanket, sipping tea and listening to the storm outside. She asked me if I ever regretted loving him. It was a complicated question. I told her I didn't regret loving. I regretted staying too long, giving too much, hoping too hard. But even in that regret, I had gained something irreplaceable. I had her, and having her was worth every tear. Ava leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" I looked out at the rain and smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending anymore. "We already are," I said. And that was the truth.